Hey everybody, it's your Highness Pubert here. Nope, no funny little intro today. Just didn't feel like writing one. Sorry. So, welcome. Huh? Welcome back to the series where I attempt to make you play really cool fucking indie games. Today's game is called Mechstermination, which is honestly really good, and I don't understand why barely anyone has played it, much like most of these indie games I've reviewed so far. I stumbled upon this game around the time COVID hit because I was bored as fuck, searching for games on the eShop, and this one stuck out to me. The art depicts one single man taking on a giant robot, and that seemed really fucking cool, so I clicked on it. When I did, I noticed the images reminded me of a game I loved back in the 3DS era, and thought,
no, it cannot be.
But it was, and I realized this game was made by the same people behind the Gunman Clive series, Horberg Productions. For the uninitiated / plebeians, Gunman Clive 1 and 2 were games that became popular on the 3DS when it released on that platform in 2013, and were extremely short and cheap Mega Man-esque games about a lone cowboy, Gunman Clive, saving his love interest, Miss Johnson, in a futuristic version of the Wild West. The game was a decently sized hit, selling 400,000 copies in 2015, with most of those sales being on the 3DS. I was very surprised when I figured out Mechstermination was made by Horberg Productions. I'd never heard about them making another game, and by the time I bought Mechstermination, they had just released another game called Super Punch Patrol, which I still haven't played. With a love for the Gunman Clive series in my heart and the negative $300 in my bank account at the time, you think I'm joking, I immediately bought Mechstermination after I realized they had created this game. The Gunman Clive games were so short and fun, you could beat both of them in about the time it takes for me to stop staring at this framed picture I have on my desk. So around 2 hours. They're both on the eShop for about $5. You should definitely pick them up because not only are they very stylish, but they're very fun and creative. Both Gunman Clive games aren't afraid to be ridiculous and over the top. You fight trains, fly on rockets, and ride pandas. What's not to love in these games? Maybe I'll do a review on them separately, but honestly, they might be too short for that. Horberg Productions created something incredibly unique with these titles, and I go back to them every once in a while whenever I crave something fun, short, and fulfilling. And those are the 3 words I'd also use to describe Mechstermination, even if it is a bit longer than the Gunman Clive games. Mechstermination is a game that was released on April 2019 for the Switch, and other platforms about a year later. It stars this guy, or this girl, or this girl, or basically, it's the year 2024, and these giant mechs, aptly named the Mega Mechs, suddenly attacked out of nowhere, and the world's leading nations fell to their knees trying to stop them from wiping out humanity. But one small group of people decided to keep fighting, called the Mechstermination Force. And your job is to fight along your fellow team members. Your job is to fight these giant robots all by yourself, with no help whatsoever, and save humanity. Pretty freaking sweet, right? That's all the plot you need in this game. Visually, it's very reminiscent of the Gunman Clive games. It's cel-shaded but without the sketchbook visuals that Gunman Clive is known for. It's also animated very much like it. If I'm being honest though, the visuals leave much to be desired. They are serviceable here and aren't horrendous or anything, it's just that the sketchbook visuals of Gunman Clive were a lot more stylish and were much more appealing. Here, the visuals are kind of cheap looking. Obviously, I'm not expecting Ghost of Tsushima visuals from a small indie studio, but if they had found some sort of unique style, the game would have looked cooler and a little less cheap. I'm sure they didn't want to use the same visual style as the Gunman Clive games, so I understand them not defaulting to that, but I still would have liked them to try a little harder when it comes to the visual style of the game. I'm sure the team is talented enough to find a different style, because they were talented enough to make a really fun and creative gameplay experience. However, the music does fucking rock, and you know what we do when the music fucking rocks. Fitting battle music for a tiny man defeating a seemingly undefeatable foe. Again, Horberg Productions are a talented team of individuals that have created a fantastic game that further evolves the Gunman Clive formula without being another entry in the series. Go ahead, say it.
Okay. This is your spoiler warning. Pubert will be discussing some of the game's boss fights in great detail. Tiny man screams as he falls? Wait.
Well, there you have it, folks. Mechstermination Force is a platformer run-and-gun boss rush game similar to Contra and Shadow of the Colossus. It's Contra in its gameplay, but Shadow of the Colossus in level design. Our hero runs, jumps again, climbs, and uses a variety of different gun types to single-handedly destroy huge alien mechs from outer space. Somehow. He is the only one defeating these robots, and they don't even question how he's doing it, which they shouldn't because he's saving everyone's asses. Or she, depending on which character you choose. You know, women can save the world too, I guess. Anyway, like I mentioned before, this is a boss rush game like Shadow of the Colossus. So all you do is fight the Mega Mechs in the levels, and that's about it. I've always felt that bosses are the best and most memorable parts of video games, since they test all your skills up to that point in the game. So having the entirety of the game be bosses is really cool because the entirety of the game becomes memorable. It's why I like Cuphead so much. Some run and gun platforming sections would have been cool, but that wasn't the point of the game. The game was focusing on making the bosses as creative as humanly possible, and if it had run and gun levels, it more than likely would have detracted from that, and the bosses wouldn't have been as cool or as aplenty, so I don't mind the game not including them, although some people might find it kinda weird. So what makes these bosses so fucking cool? Well, just the fact that they're essentially platforming puzzles you have to solve to defeat them. Kind of like how in Shadow of the Colossus you have to solve the puzzle of how to get on the Colossus and how to climb to its weak point, all while trying your gosh diddling fucking darndest not to fall off. During each boss fight, you break specific parts of their body, specifically these red and orange spots on their body, and they'll transform or do something crazy you didn't expect as you continue to destroy them. The orange spots you destroy with your gun, but the red ones you hit with your giant baseball bat. Yeah, you have a giant bat, so what? It's very goofy looking, but it gets the job done. An example of the transformations I'm talking about involves the Mechstructor, one of the first bosses you defeat. It has two main phases. In the first phase, it's a humanoid mech, and you have to defeat it by breaking the mask on its face and revealing the big red weak spot. It'll try punching you, but you can dodge it and run up its arm to destroy the red spot with your cartoon bat. You have to hit this spot 3 times. The first time, it's simple, and you think you got it, but the fight evolves ever so slightly after that first hit, just enough to keep you on your toes, because the second time it punches you, it throws 3 continuous punches instead of just a 1, and you have to continuously jump onto its arms like this. It's such a simple little change, but it makes the fight feel more alive, and like I mentioned, it keeps you on your toes. Okay, let's play a little game. Do you think the boss in its second phase is gonna A, turn red and start attacking faster and more aggressively? B, sprout wings or rocket boots or something and start attacking you from the background? Or C, you'll break out the little alien controlling it and you'll start fighting it in a 1v1 fist fight? I'm giving you exactly no time to answer the question because none of those answers are correct. This is your lesson, kid. Don't trust YouTubers, especially me. I am evil and out to make you feel like a fucking dumbass. It does this.
Whoa, that's so cool and unexpected!
Suddenly, the pace of the fight changes, and you're in an almost completely different boss, and you have to approach it differently. Changes like these keep the fight from getting stale, which is why most big boss fights have multiple phases, so it gets more exciting, and you feel like you're encountering a dangerous foe. Any normal-ass enemy won't have multiple phases, and a fight with someone out in real life won't have multiple phases either. If they did, you'd probably be fucking terrified of the formidable foe you've just encountered. You never know what's really coming next with these bosses. Figuring out how to defeat them as they continue evolving is what makes them so engaging to fight. They may seem like simple evolutions, but they're creative. Another example of this is the Mechstermination 3. Oh, I get it, cause it's the robot and it's like a man is in from the game from like wow. At this point of the game, you've earned your climbing gloves, and this boss is where you learn how to use them effectively. You start the fight by shooting, and figure out that you can destroy pieces of its armor to climb up the robot, and destroy all 3 of the red spots on its body. Once you do destroy these pieces, it changes unexpectedly and splits into 2 robots, and again, you use the climbing ability to get to the red spots, avoiding its new attacks. And then it splits even further, and you just shoot the orange balls at the end of the lens until it's all gone. Again, it's very unexpected, creative, and a little silly. And just like any good boss fight, the pace of the fight is changed once again. The fight becomes a little more frantic as now you have to avoid 2 smaller robots, then potentially 4. Fear possibly strikes you because you might not be able to handle all those robots all at once. Some of the later boss fights are a lot bigger, so much bigger in fact you have to destroy them from the inside, and you climb up them to destroy the main red spots. And the fight evolves by having the different portions of the robots attack you in different ways. Like in the Macbeth, you climb as you avoid the big laser being shot at you from the outside. There's the electrified floor while you're platforming and the little turret shooting at you from the inside, but once you get to the neck, it changes, and now you have to avoid the surge of electricity coming down from the wall you're grabbing by jumping onto the other wall. It's all very well designed and fun. The Gunmech 5 behaves differently, but it's the same idea. This boss is actually the final boss of Gunman Clive 1, so that's kind of cute, or lazy, I can't tell which one. One of my favorite ones is this one. It's climbing between two skyscrapers and you have to scale the skyscraper yourself to get to it, and once you do, you have to make sure to stay on it while it rotates and shoots all sorts of shit at you. These cool premises for boss fights are what makes the game worth playing. You just want to see how much crazier they can get. There is no cooler feeling than climbing up a ginormous beast and destroying its weak spot. It's what made Shadow the Colossus so good, and this game manages to capture that feeling perfectly. It might not be as grandiose and dramatic like when you stick the sword in the Colossus in the PS2 Classic, and you're fighting for your life to stay on, but smashing that part of the robot and seeing it transform into a whole different beast altogether, or seeing the next part you have to climb to, still invokes that feeling of overcoming such an overwhelming challenge. Another favorite of mine is the Mechstermination, which is a skull with a snake slithering in and out of it. The cool thing about this boss is that it doesn't really transform, it just has the snake slithering in different patterns, and you have to figure out how to jump on them to destroy the red spots on them, as they slide in and out of the lava to try and kill you. It might not be big, but it's really scary and harrowing trying to get to the red spots on these snakes. Probably the one that took me the most tries if I'm being honest, especially since it gets increasingly difficult to stay on the snakes and destroy the weak spots. But I did it. Yeah, alright, the game is really cool and I want you to buy it, you get it. But there are a couple of things that do bother me a teeny bit about the game that I thought were worth mentioning. First, I hate the game for having multiplayer because I don't have any friends to play it with. I did try getting someone to play it with me, but he wasn't very cooperative. What the fuck, bro? Are you even trying? Secondly, the game gives you rankings, kinda like Angry Birds does. Except in order to get 3 stars in Mechstermination Force, you have to beat the boss in a certain amount of time, and the game also has a no damage badge. You must be wondering if I got every single star. Well, of course I did. Here's the proof. They were really hard, okay? Gosh, leave me alone. Doing this is especially difficult since the game has quite a bit of RNG. Some of these bosses can feel pretty different every time you repeatedly fight one, because sometimes attacks can come out at different times during each repeated attempt at fighting the same boss fight. And that's cool and all until you're trying to get all these stars. For example, the Mechstructor's punch that lets you get on it to destroy the red spot on its face comes out at very different times. So in some runs, you're stuck sitting there waiting for it, and in other runs, it comes out right away, so you get wildly inconsistent times, and it's completely out of your control. I understand you want to make the fight not feel super scripted, but you could have programmed in being able to bait the punch out, so you're not guessing when it's coming out, especially when that move is so integral to beating the boss. Maybe you get a little too close to him and he throws the punch. Just something simple, giving you more control over the fight and letting you get the 3 stars a lot easier. Some of the fights have less RNG and jank than this, but most of them will have something that'll make you want to pull your hair out. Alright, this third one you might feel is kinda dumb, but I don't feel like it is, so bear with me. So the game obviously gives you the option to fight the bosses again so you can get the better rankings and stuff, and the game gives you different abilities at different points throughout the game, specifically the ability to climb and double jump. So that means there are certain bosses you fight without these abilities because you haven't gotten far enough in the game to get said abilities. But when you refight the bosses, you still fight them with those missing abilities. Do you see what I'm getting at here?
Nope.
Throughout the game, you earn these abilities, so I feel it would make more sense if when you refight the bosses, it would let you keep all your abilities instead of stripping you down of certain ones, just so you can refight the bosses the exact same way. It would be a lot better and more fun if you could go back and destroy the early and mid-game bosses with all your abilities. It would give you a lot more control over the fight if you did, because you would have different ways of approaching them, and it would help you figure out creative ways to get the best times to get the 3 stars. However, you're instead just stuck fighting the bosses the exact same way, except you're a little more frustrated since there's barely anything you can do differently to cut your time, except just be fucking fast. If you had all your abilities, like for example to beat the tutorial boss here, you could clearly double jump over this bit so you can get to the red spot a lot faster. But no, instead you're stuck just destroying the pillar still. This isn't that big of a deal, it's just a gripe I have because way too many devs like to restrict players' creativity and freedom just so they make sure players play their game the way the devs themselves intended them to play it. A game that gives you abilities and lets you be as creative as you want with them is always the best. Just look at the latest Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. I could go on for hours hours on how this game is a master at giving the player a shitload of freedom to do whatever the fuck they want, but I'm not going to right now since I'm sure you already know. Obviously, the mechanics of Mechstermination Force aren't as complex as Tears of the Kingdom, but something as simple as letting you refight the bosses with all your abilities instead of removing them from you would open up new possibilities, and it would have been way more fun if the game let you figure out what those possibilities could be. Half the fun of a video game is going,
Can I do this?
trying it, and then it working, and you flipping your shit because you feel like a genius. I'm sure Horberg Productions just wanted to avoid you absolutely destroying their game or something, but I feel that simple change would have made the game a lot more fun than it already is. Lastly, the game kind of commits the cardinal sin of a video game by completely changing the way you play the game for the final boss fight, basically making it into a completely different game. Yes, in most video games, this is an egregious sin, and I wouldn't blame you for thinking it is in this one. But I think this one is kinda cool, so it gets a pass. You're in a mech floating around in space shooting at an ever-changing boss fight composed of all the mechs you've defeated. I enjoy this boss fight, but I do wish it would have stuck with the run and gun stuff. Or like, to justify this change in gameplay, it could have had more boss fights in this playstyle, kind of like Cuphead with the platforming bosses and the airplane bosses. Again, it isn't terrible, it just would have been cooler not to change the playstyle up so much. I may have done a lot of complaining just now, but I still think this is a game you should 100% buy. The creativity behind Mechstermination Force is plentiful. It might not be the greatest indie game ever made like some of the ones I've reviewed so far, but there clearly was a ton of love and ambition put into this. Horberg Productions is a very talented and creative studio that has some great ideas, and I would love to see what they could do if they had a bigger budget. I do hope you guys buy this game, as well as go back and buy the Gunman Clive games, and if you like all those games, check out their new one, Onion Assault, which looks to be inspired by Super Mario Bros. 2. I actually haven't played it at all, so I don't know if it's any good, but I do trust Horberg Productions' quality, and I'll definitely buy the game and possibly review it in the coming months. They didn't pay me to promote it, by the way, I just thought I'd support them as much as possible. Oh shit, do you fucking see this? Little bro's doing a little dance.